Hi, thank you for tuning in again. This is day 2 of my channel, and I want to carry the conversation forward. Yesterday I talked about neurodivergence and me coming to terms with that. Today I want to talk more about gender identity. It is a difficult topic to talk about. I feel like it can be really charged and lots of emotions that different people have around it. But I'm just going to be talking from my own lived experience here with it. And again, just being vulnerable and continuing with this bathtub theme because I think I like it. Starting a couple years ago, I felt like I entered a sort of gender identity crisis, and there were a lot of pieces of the puzzle that came together that I think activated that for me. And first, I just want to start off by saying that this is just me speaking from my experience, and this is not meant to be invalidating in any way to anyone or to incite anything. I just feel like this is an important topic to talk about for a lot of people out there who are questioning their gender and they're not sure what to do about it, and it kind of seems like in some ways they're getting one-sided answers wherever they look, and that can create more confusion and conflict. So this is more just for the people who resonate with what I went through, and it's not for anyone else. So just that disclaimer there. So for me it started a few years ago, and I was working in a mental health crisis center at the time. Gender was starting to be talked about more in the center, and what being transgender meant. Now prior to this, I've had transgender friends and have been obviously involved in the LGBT community for a long time, and transgender people were not a new thing for me, but at this time it felt like the conversation was just going deeper, and then there were a couple people in my life who I knew at the time who were beginning their transition experience, and so having conversations with them and just kind of seeing what that was like for them, I think in a way planted some seeds for me, and just the overarching conversation that was happening in society at the time, where the idea of questioning your gender started to become, in some sense, normalized. In another sense, not so much, and I'll get into that later, but it was definitely happening more. And so it definitely triggered some things for me. And then I had a close friend at the time who also was someone I knew to be highly intuitive, who just directly asked me once if I was transgender, and I had, as far as I remember, had never brought that up in a conversation. I don't even remember what precipitated the conversation. I don't think it started with me talking about questioning my gender. I think it was more maybe talking about some insecurities. But yeah, just that direct, very blunt question, are you transgender, really took me off guard. And to add some more context to this, around this time, I had also been having some experiences with psychedelics, and there was one experience in particular I had with Bufo that had brought up what felt like some repressed trauma for me. And it didn't happen during the session, but it happened after. It felt like I would just have sort of these spontaneous flashbacks of what felt like an experience of being raped when I was really young, like 3 or 4. And wasn't getting clear visuals of it, but was getting like some pretty strong sensations in my body, and kind of like glimpses or like fuzzy images. That left me being really unclear about what was happening, and if this was referencing something real or not from my past. So I started focusing a lot more at that time on wondering about the nature of repression, and being concerned that this was indeed like a repressed trauma coming up that I needed to work with. So I did my best to process through that, and had some support along the way. But yeah, that was sort of the context for this all happening. And when I was asked that question, are you transgender? For me, it activated this part of my brain that goes searching for answers. And also I think this was shortly after I had completed my hypnosis training. So, I had to take in a 6-month deep dive into understanding the subconscious and how it works, and that a lot of things can be buried in the subconscious that we're not always consciously aware of. And then learning, in addition to that, practices for investigating our shadow, parts of ourselves that have been disowned. So I've been doing all this stuff. And so my natural instinct with that, in addition to just being an overthinker in general, was to question, am I really transgender? And to try to search within myself for that answer. Because this was a time when I was really committed to just being fully truthful and honest with myself, and I didn't want to leave any stone unturned. I just wanted to be committed to authenticity and just knowing the truth. So I took that question actually very seriously, and started asking it, am I transgender? And of course the mind goes searching for things. There's this concept in NLP called transderivational search, where when you are in a certain state, or you're focused on, sorry, I got this hair on me, or you're focused on a certain subject, that the brain naturally will try to link up connections with similar experiences. So it just kind of naturally creates this chain. So like, for example, if you're feeling really sad, then you're more likely to remember experiences of being sad as opposed to experiences of being happy in that moment, unless you directly try to influence that. But that's kind of what happens automatically. So yeah, that's a phenomenon that even as hypnotists we work with to our advantage. To we call it an affect bridge, to help a client find the root cause of an issue, which usually with problems in our lives, if we haven't been able to fix it just through sheer willpower, it's most likely that there is a subconscious reason holding that problem in place. And we can keep trying and fighting it, but it just makes it that much harder if it has like a subconscious anchor to it. So it's a lot easier to just go straight to the source, to that root cause, and then untangle it so that it frees up ourselves to change our behaviors or thought patterns. So anyways, yeah, I was doing this with myself. I was asking the question, am I really transgender? And just sincerely wanting to know, so I wasn't in some kind of hypothetical denial. And then my brain went looking for experiences that in effect were, I'll just say, validating of that. And I need to put some more context behind this too. So growing up, I never really fit in, and I wasn't really great at sports, and just wasn't, involved in that. I felt like I didn't fully fit in with the other boys. I remember having an experience of going through a really early puberty, like faster than a lot of the other boys around me, like in elementary school. And like I started getting like hairy legs really fast, and just felt embarrassed about that. I wasn't embarrassed per se about having hair, but it was more, I was comparing myself with the boys around me who, like, almost none of them had hair on their legs, so I felt like, the odd one out. And I already felt like a freak. I already felt like I was different. Kind of ties into what I was talking about yesterday with being neurodivergent. And then, the trauma I'd had that I think set me back developmentally in some ways. So, because most of my severe trauma happened like back to back before the age of 6. So I think it really disrupted my normal development. Anyways, so I was ashamed of just feeling like the odd one out, and I remember trying to shave my leg hair, but I didn't want to shave it off completely. I was just trying to trim it so it looked shorter, so it just didn't stand out as much. And then, my brain went looking for validating experiences and trying to understand my past and saying, were these experiences because I was actually transgender and didn't realize it, or was it just the original explanation I had? Because the narrative came to me that just the very fact that you're questioning your gender most likely means that you're some form of transgender, that you're probably not cisgender. And that's a common narrative even still today. And it just reinforced this loop that, oh shoot, well, I'm questioning this, so that in itself must mean that there's something different inherently about me. That must mean inherently that maybe I really am transgender. So, so when my brain went looking for experiences in the past, it was also carrying with it this narrative that were those just examples of me being in denial. There's another experience when I was young, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8, pretty young, and one of my female cousins was living with us at the time. This was when I was living with my aunt, who was my legal guardian, and one of my cousins was living with us too. And I'd primarily been raised by women my whole life, and that was just what I knew. My dad wasn't really around, and I didn't have any really positive male influences that were consistently around me. So I was just around women all the time, and I think I was always an open-minded person. I don't think I really appreciated strict norms. I think I always had like a bit of fluidity, or just an appreciation for thinking outside the box and going against the grain. So that was just part of my nature, and yeah, and it wasn't always comfortable. It was part of why I was made fun of. I was called an alien when I was a kid, and yeah, I just didn't fit in. And then at a certain point, I kind of just said fuck it, and I think what I did when I was I don't know, 7 or 8, I ran with it, and I was just like, okay, if I'm the freak here, I'm just gonna own it, and I'm gonna lean into it and be even more of a freak, and this time be intentional about it. And so I wasn't just the odd one anymore. I became the class clown, and then I wasn't just the class clown anymore. I became the really weird one who drew everyone's attention, and I guess I just tried to use it for my advantage, and see how I could gain people's sympathy by doing that, and in a way kind of became manipulative. But I mean, it started innocently, not out of like ill intent, but it kind of snowballed. It wasn't like all at once, but I kind of just leaned more and more into doing weirder and weirder things to get people's attention and try to find other ways of connecting, clandestine ways of connecting with people. So yeah, and in a weird way, it met those needs at the time. It met them for a few years. And then when I went into high school, I tried to just ditch all of it without realizing that those aspects of me were actually rooted in something real, exaggerated but real, some deep insecurities and some deep energies, and I couldn't just drop them, but I had to realize much later that you have to integrate them. You have to find a healthy way to bring them into your psyche in balance with everything else. So yeah, that's a whole other story, though. I could go much more into detail with that. But with this situation, I was slightly effeminate as a boy. I don't think I've ever been super macho. I wouldn't say I was ever like super flamboyant per se either. I was just slightly effeminate, and was raised by women. And I just remember a time when my cousin and my aunt were getting ready. We were trying to go somewhere, and at this point I was just like used to waiting on women to put on their makeup and get ready, and just like feeling frustrated with that. And I just remember looking in the mirror and like playing with like an empty tube of chapstick and just seeing what it'd be like to just like pretend if I had my own makeup routine. Not because I really, at least I don't think, it's hard to remember, but not because I think I really wanted to wear makeup. It's just like, well, they've been doing this the whole time. I'm not doing anything else. I'm just waiting on them. So I don't know. I think it was more like just like a zoned out kind of thing. And then I just remember getting rebuked for that later, and then my aunt thinking that I actually really wanted to wear makeup or something like that, which also isn't cool. I think it's important for parents to keep open minds with their kids and be accepting and understanding, and to just not attack children for being different. So but yeah, I don't think it came from a place of wanting to be a girl. I think it just was just the context of the situation. So but yeah, my brain, it for a time was latching on to those kinds of experiences and questioning, like, did this mean that I really did want to be a girl? Was I in denial or something? Was I actually transgender? Was the fact that I didn't fit into all the gender norms evidence that I was transgender? And then, years later, when I was about 18 or 19, I was attending Job Corps at the time and living there. I had a roommate that I looked up to in some ways as like a big brother, and he was older than me. At first, he seemed more mature than me. He seemed very intelligent. He seemed like he was ambitious, had a lot of strong goals, wanted to change the world just like I did. And so I looked up to him as someone who I wanted to be more like. And he was very masculine, and he liked being a leader. And he had been through a very difficult past too, and had been judged and made fun of for being different as a kid. And so I think that's also why I took inspiration from him, because I thought, well, if he's been through all that, similar experiences I've been through, in some cases maybe even worse, then and he's as strong and confident as he is right now, working towards changing the world, then like there's hope for me yet, And so I really looked up to him as a big brother, and he seemed to take me under his wing and seemed to like really care for me and look after me, tried to encourage me. And we're all multifaceted, and I think that there was a genuine part of him that did want to do that. I think there was a part of his soul that saw the connection between us and wanted to, I think in some ways, maybe he felt bad for me. But there were some other things going on there too. And looking back, I think there were a lot of narcissistic traits that he had, and can see a lot of the ways that he manipulated me, and did some kind of fucked up shit. And that there were a lot of ways that he devalued me and hacked away at my self-esteem. So there was one incident that happened where he comes into our room, and I guess he'd been hanging out with his friends or whatever, and then just kind of leaps into telling me that everyone sees you as a woman. And he just looks very just straight-faced telling me this, like he's the big brother telling it to me for my own good, and implying in a way like I need to man up. But he just went into like, everyone sees you as a woman, and they don't really see you as a man. And knowing this person more in retrospect, like being able to, I think, see some things more clearly, I think he was really good at tuning into someone's deepest insecurities and weak points, and just like placing a needle there and just twisting it, and doing so in a way that came across as like, oh, I'm looking out for you, but really it's just like I'm destroying your self-esteem. And I think that he had sensed by that time that one of my deepest insecurities was not being man enough, and not fitting in, and he used that to his advantage. And I think there are a lot of ways that he felt I think there were some ways that he was jealous of me too, and I think that's partly why he did some of these things, to just like cut me down, to make himself feel better. So yeah, and so, you know, in this questioning phase, my brain goes to that experience too, and is like, man, he told you this way back then, and you didn't listen at the time. Maybe he was just telling you the truth. And you know, it just stacks these things up. This transderivational search, it just like links up, it just creates this chain with one link and another, looking for evidence. There's a part of our brain actually that specializes in this, the reticular activating system. And it's very good at finding patterns and reaffirming things it sees. So that was another experience that had happened. And then of course, being queer, and liking men, well, let's just say I also realized through this whole process that there is still some deep shame. Even after years of being out and being part of the queer community, there was still some deep shame of being queer and feeling like it wasn't right, and feeling like there was something like gross and disgusting about it, or something unnatural about it. And yeah, just things that I still needed to look at. But that shame was still there. So it was some very deep shame. And the tricky thing is, we can have these feelings of feeling different, feeling shame for who we are, and sometimes we can also attach a narrative to those feelings that I don't know how to say it, create a sort of web, or create I don't know how else to say it other than they keep those feelings in place. If the narrative comes from outside us, not from within us, you know, the narrative within us being what the root of that is, you know. But if it's a narrative coming from outside us, then it's just going to keep those feelings in place, and it might even seek to like repress those feelings, or shove them away, or compartmentalize them, or, you know, whatever. So this is something that was happening for me, and just started questioning it more and more. And it was not something that ever brought me joy, and it wasn't ever something that felt right for me or true for me. It felt like a compulsive thing for me, and it felt like it always carried this distress with it. Like, I don't want to be a woman. I don't want to be transgender. I'm afraid to be, but I feel this need to know for sure, just in case, because I don't want to be in denial. And then with that narrative that states just questioning itself is a likely sign that you're transgender, it just feeds into that. So in hypnosis, there's a model that I find very, it just kind of simplifies like the hypnosis process of how to help someone. And it goes like this. So first, you identify the problem. You disassociate from the problem. You just disassociate, and you associate to a positive resource. And then you associate that resource with the problem. So you create a new association. And finally, you extend yourself into the future to consolidate this new configuration. And ideally, I think a good hypnotist looks for resources that are already within you. They don't try to just plant resources in you. They find what's already within you that wants to come through. And then they just clear what's in the way of that. And in a way that sort of unties the knot of the problem all on its own. But this model, I think, is also a way to create unwanted hypnotic patterns too. So, so in my case, I'm just going to break this down. For me, the problem was that I was insecure about my masculinity. Something that I've had most of my life. And these questions coming up, like my friend asking me if I was transgender, things of that nature, what I feel they did for me is they brought to the surface that insecurity around my masculinity. So, one, identify the problem. In this case, the problem is the insecurity. Two, disassociate. And I think for me, this was achieved through the notion that I could be repressing something about myself, that I could be in denial. And what happens in trance can be really easy. What conversational hypnosis teaches you is that it can be you can go into trance just by being asked a question, something that throws you off guard, that gets your subconscious searching for something. So for me, this dissociation happened through just this idea that I could be repressing something. I could be repressing being transgender. And that switches me into trance to search, and that creates a sort of disassociation. In this sense, you could say disassociation from the reality that I already know myself to be. So one, identify the problem. Two, disassociate. Three is find a resource, or in other words, find a solution to the problem. And something that I did during this questioning process is I did a lot of reading, I did a lot of watching YouTube videos, did a lot of asking questions to people that I knew. I just did a lot of like this seeking and trying to find answers, trying to learn more. And there's a lot of information out there. There are some differing perspectives, but there's a lot of information out there. And I guess the narrative that how do I say this? Just the seeking itself for the answers was in itself part of the narrative that reinforced itself compulsively. And this was that the possible solution to this discomfort within myself, this insecurity about my masculinity, was to transition. And whether socially or medically or whatever. And this was the in a way, this was connected with that thought that just questioning itself means I might be transgender. And so if that's already in place, then it just sort of cements this idea that sorry, I'm just feeling some anxiety right now, and I think I'm feeling this anxiety because I know this is a very hot button issue, and I'm trying to be careful with the way I say things, and I really don't want to offend anyone. I am just trying to honestly speak about my experience and breaking it down. So yeah, I'm just feeling some anxiety around that. This is still a weird thing for me to talk about. And then of course there's still also anxiety too of even just talking about it, how that will affect other people's opinions about me. And if it will connect with beliefs that they have around gender questioning, and they'll just maybe they'll start to believe that I've been in denial. So it's just like some anxiety. I'm just giving in that a little bit of space. Okay. Yeah, so the resource, so we're at, step 3 right now. Identify the problem, disassociate from the problem, and then identify a resource, so associate to a resource. And in this case, the association that was happening more and more was that the resource, the solution, was some form of transition. As a solution to my insecurity about my masculinity. And then just to expand on that a bit more too, so as I mentioned in my last video, I have clinical OCD, and I think a lot of people don't really understand OCD very well still. They just assume it's about germs or cleanliness or neatness, but there's a whole lot more to OCD than that. There's a lot going on behind the scenes mentally. That's actually even a lot worse than some of that stuff. And OCD, what it can do is it can make you question your own reality, and it can bring intrusive thoughts that are what are called ego dystonic, which means they're out of alignment with your values or your sense of self. But they're so intrusive that they come forcefully, and there's oftentimes you might try to fight them, but it just kind of makes them stronger. And then there's a whole therapy for it, ERP, exposure and response prevention, that is about being mindful about that and not feeling the need to fight those thoughts, just allowing them in, which starts to neutralize them and take the power away from them. But when you're in it, it feels very alarming and distressing, and it feels like you have no control over your own mind. It feels like almost in a way like you're possessed sometimes. So that's also what was going on for me in this, and a lot of those ego dystonic thoughts that were getting me to question my reality. And it happening in a compulsive way. So like the looking for answers thing, that became a type of compulsion, to try to mitigate the obsession, the fear-based obsession around, am I transgender or not? Am I repressing this? Am I in denial? And seeking answers as a compulsion to try to just minimize those feelings. So really what I was doing was actually looking for it's an interesting thing. It's I was hoping I would find evidence that I wasn't transgender this whole time. But I was worried that I was, and my brain was freaking out about it. And like any anxiety thought, kind of panicking around any evidence it took to be a sign of that. And then the compulsion part of that was trying to minimize that anxiety by finding answers out there that would indicate that I wasn't. So it was really this kind of fight with myself. So that was going on. So I kind of squeezed 2 steps in one. So 3 was identify the resource or solution, and then 4 would be associate the resource to the problem. And so that's what was starting to happen, is this solution of transitioning starting to be associated with my insecurity. And then the 5th one, which is just a form of future pacing, just going out into the future and bringing this solution, imagining it influencing your future. And so I would start to just visualize what it would be like to be transgender. And in OCD, they call this checking, when you check your feelings to see like what your distress level is. And so I would like visualize myself and check my feelings about what this would bring up for me. And like I said, usually it was a form of distress or anxiety. And this gets a little complicated too, because I think through this process, ultimately I also came to respect and start to appreciate my feminine side more. And I see it more from a Jungian perspective, but we all have a masculine and feminine side. And if we repress one of those sides, it can lead to issues. And I think a man repressing his feminine side, it in a way cuts him off from certain things that I think are very healthy as a human being. And it looks differently for everyone. So connecting to your feminine side doesn't always mean like some kind of outward expression. It doesn't necessarily mean like wearing women's clothing or makeup. I'm speaking very generally here. Again, this is like, this is for people who resonate with what I'm saying. If you don't, this this doesn't apply to you so much. This, listen to your own intuition. But yeah, so yeah, a man accessing his feminine side doesn't necessarily mean something outwardly expressive, although it can for some people. But I think even more importantly, it's the internal connection. It's accessing his empathy, his sense of relatedness with other people, his intuition, his spontaneity and creativity, his innocence, things like that. And this whole process actually ended up taking me really deep into learning more about the archetypes, the masculine and feminine archetypes, and doing some deep reflections and contemplations on those and how they relate to myself. It feels like it helped me understand a lot more things, not just about myself, but about human dynamics in general. And I'm sure there'll be more content I put out about that, because that's something I've become very passionate about. I think I've always been passionate about that in some way, about archetypes and psychology, especially the subconscious. But I became particularly passionate about learning more about the archetypes and how they apply to us. So I think I'll be putting out some content about that. So and that was ultimately what actually helped me navigate out of this. That was part of my healing process. Learning to accept both my masculine and my feminine. And I'm still in that process of integrating that and finding my own balance within myself. But at least now I'm to a point where I can more accept myself as a man and just see that I'm multifaceted, and that I can trust myself, that I never wanted to be a different gender. I never felt myself as a different gender, and this is just something that I became obsessive about because of a deep insecurity, and potentially also being neurodivergent, getting hyperfixated on things, and mentally stuck on things and having a hard time pulling myself out of that. I think that contributed too. Also, sometimes what happens with neurodivergence is there can be a black and white way of seeing things. And it's definitely not within my values to do that. I really try my best to see the middle, and see sort of just a full display of possibilities. But for some neurodivergent people, it can be sort of a lens to see things more in black and white. It can be sort of like a go-to. And I think that was part of this whole thing too. That in a way I was, even though you could say the broader part of me, or my soul or whatever, does appreciate seeing all the colors and the gray and everything, and the fuzzies. A big part of my brain really likes seeing things in black and white, and that includes gender norms, and that includes this strangeness around, or this discomfort with being in the gray, this discomfort with not being in a neat, tidy box. My brain wanted me to fit neatly into the man box. I think just for simplicity's sake, really, more than anything else, not because of anything necessarily like not anything religious or anything like that, or fundamentalist. It was more like just simplicity's sake. It just likes categories. It's like it's a parsimony, just so things are neater and cleaner. And I think that's probably because my brain is so erratic that I think it's like a self-organizing principle that tries to manage that erraticness, and it just happens automatically. So it's not so much a values thing, it's more of just like a self-management thing, a mental self-management. Because otherwise I think things can kind of feel overwhelming. So yeah, that's a kind of dichotomy I think I've had to navigate like my whole life. Yeah. But yeah, there was this discomfort with not fitting cleanly into the man box. And I really just had to take a good look at that. Yeah, and I'm just learning to just appreciate more of the dimensions of myself, and more of the messiness of myself, and the blurred lines, and also just to trust myself too. I think those are all really important lessons for me in this whole journey. So in a way, I don't regret it, because it was a very powerful teaching experience for me. It taught me a lot. It taught me well, it got me to face some of these insecurities I've had my whole life, to shed more light on them, and to move towards greater acceptance of myself. It really encouraged me to embrace more of my feminine side, to accept it more, to come back around to questioning gender norms again, which I did as a kid, to some extent, but it just got me to kind of just reevaluate that again. And it was one of the things that really prompted me to get treatment for my OCD. It also helped me to learn a lot more about OCD. And there's a whole subtype of OCD called transgender OCD that helped me a lot when I learned about that, and connected with people who also have those experiences. I think it really helped. And there were times I wanted to end my life over this, and went into some very dark places around this. And I really think that connecting to some of those communities played an important role in helping me keep going. Yeah, so there's a lot of power in peer support, for sure. And then I've been in therapy too, and then just untangling these knots within myself, one knot at a time, Yeah, so but now I'm more on this journey of what I'm, I guess, calling archetypal balance or equilibrium, of wanting to intentionally access all the different archetypes. And so far I've identified 12, 6 masculine, 6 feminine. There are a lot more archetypes. There are different archetypal systems and configurations out there. These are just the ones that I've been focusing on for myself. But wanting to intentionally work with all 12 of them, and to find more of an equilibrium within myself. And that equilibrium, it looks differently for each person. it's not necessarily like a one size fits all kind of thing where you just you just like everyone who's imbalanced looks and acts and thinks and speaks the same way. It's not like that. So, but yeah, that's the work I'm on right now. That's the journey. So, yeah. Well, it's one of them. And geez, what else did I want to say? I mean, I think that's a really good segue to the things I want to say about the archetypes. So I think I might kind of close out here. But yeah, going back to hypnosis, I kind of saw this process as sort of going through like a hypnotic process for me of it's not like I created distress out of nothing, because there was something real there that it attached to, but I created distress out of the wrong thing. And that's why one of my teachers, he says that oftentimes the problem that we think we have consciously is never the real problem. It's usually always something that's deeper behind the scenes, something that we're not aware of. And more times than not, the solution, the resource is not going to come from outside the person. It comes directly from within them. And so the work of a good hypnotist is to create space to support that person into going within their own subconscious, to find their own root cause, and to do our best to not interject our thoughts or opinions into it, to be as unbiased as possible. Really just to ask good questions, pay attention to good nonverbal body cues and language patterns and tone of voice, things like that. To just be really attuned to the person, and to just be an open space for them, and to create a safe space for them, and to help guide them into their subconscious. And then they will find the answer within themselves. And when they do, it will be a major sense of relief, like a weight lifting. And it'll make sense, and then they'll just know. It brings clarity. And with this, with what I had, this loop I had fallen into, that would be, speaking as a hypnotist, that would be an example of a bad hypnosis session, to interject an opinion into the situation, to ask leading questions, instead of more open questions that riff off of something the person already said. We want to ask questions that peel back the layers and that meet the person where they are, exactly where they are. We don't want to ask leading questions that can influence where the person goes, where their brain starts searching for information. So if I was to critique myself in this process, or critique the experience, I would say the first thing that went wrong is the real problem wasn't met on its own terms. The problem was the insecurity about my masculinity. And the question that should be asked in that context is, tell me more about that, or what, where does that come from? It's to hold an open space. It's to get the person to look within themselves. The question, are you transgender, is a leading question. It's the wrong question to ask. And a good hypnotist would also maybe get, the person's history, learn a bit more about them, their context, things that they've already tried, they'd get more of an idea of where this person is coming from in their life, trauma that they've maybe experienced. So they'd be very careful to frame things. And yeah. So that's what it really comes down to. I think I'll end it here. I'll just end it by saying that there is still a little bit of fear about putting this video out there. It is possible that some people will take this the wrong way. Again, it's not meant to do that. This is not meant to invalidate certain people's experiences. The whole point really of this is for me to say, the answer comes from within ourselves. And sometimes we need some good support to help us peel back the layers so we can understand what's the root. Because oftentimes we think we know what the problem is, but we really don't. But the answer is still always going to come from within ourselves. That's the place to look. And a good support person helps someone go deeper and deeper into that. And when you have the right answer, you really know it's not something that you have to second guess yourself about. There will be something that feels right about it. And there still might be some intrusive thoughts or anxious thoughts that come up. And there might be other problems, adjacent problems that still need to be addressed. But it'll just feel right. And there'll just be a sense of relief. Maybe a sense of relaxation, clarity. It'll just feel like a weight lifting off you. And after just coming to terms with myself, it's just felt like a weight lifting off me. In a way, almost like Dorothy with the ruby slippers, just like realizing she had the power to go back home this whole time, And the journey was still valuable. She still learned things along the way. She still made friends along the way. And that's how I felt with this too. I connected with people along the way. I learned a lot, had a lot of different experiences, and in the end just clicked my heels and returned home. So although home looks a bit different once you go back, it's not quite the same. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to this. I greatly value your patience and open-mindedness and just listening to this conversation. This is still a very vulnerable conversation for me to have. I haven't had this conversation in depth with more than one or two people. So it's a big deal for me to just put this out there like this. I made some videos in the past on my channel about this, but I think this is the first time that I just really just put it all together and kind of told the whole story. So I appreciate you. Oh yeah, even though it still feels a little nervous for me to do so, I appreciate you just taking the time and having empathy. And my hope, my real hope with this and putting this out too, is that I know there are other people like me out there who have been questioning their gender and are feeling in distress about it. They know that it's not something that's right for them, but they are really confused and maybe are not getting very good support. And like I said, the good support that I talked about is about having a totally unbiased space to hold for people and just asking really good questions that gets them to look deep within themselves. Yeah, so I know there are people out there like me. I've met quite a few of them online in the forums. And I know that there are a lot of young men out there who are going through this and who feel shame, deep shame around not being man enough or not feeling man enough. And I just want to reach out to you guys and just say that I feel you. I've been there. I'm in some ways still working through that, through some aspects of that. And you're good, you know. There's always more we can learn and ways we can grow. But you know, fundamentally as a human being, you're good. So reach out to me, please, if you feel like you need support and if this resonates with you. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.